Yeah, this is steep. Probably can't tell how steep this is, but this is very steep. Start down at the bottom. Or actually, I may work my way up here and kind of do a little at a time.
Okay.
Back up, because you can swing stuff that way.
I know.
Yeah, that was a big steep hill right there. The video doesn't really show how steep that is. I'm glad to be home for the day. I'm pretty wore out today. After I did that place, it didn't take very long to do that. I mowed another place in weed eater, and it was an overgrown place. And it was for a family member. I'm not getting back into mowing as far as trying to do it, or lawn care, period, you know, as far as trying to do it really for a living. This I did because it was a bigger job, and I don't mind to do jobs like that as far as like one-time mows or weed eating, something like this, something that's worth it. Like this here, I made $100 in about 40 minutes. But it's because I stay consistent as well, you know. So if you've got a good weed eater and you know how to use it good, and you've got good work ethic or determination even really to have a good work ethic, then you can go a long ways with that alone. That means a whole lot. And so, and I think all of those things together work great, because even if you've got a good work ethic and determination and everything, if you don't have a good piece of equipment, you're not going to move nearly as quick. Me personally, I don't like to use guards on weed eaters. I've said it many times, I started out for a commercial business. We did big derby horse farms and things of that nature. And this that I'm doing here, it was like that all day pretty much, except for lunch and weed eating for me. Lunch and weed eating. Lunch and the breaks that we had. So we took 2 breaks and a lunch. That shows you how tired I am. I'm pretty wore out right now. But we had 2 breaks and a lunch. I think the lunch we took like an hour, and then the breaks we may have took 30 minutes. So it's pretty good long breaks, really. And we worked 10 hours a day. So, but it was consistent work, you know. Weed eating was, when I first started out, all I did was weed eat, and it was like this right here, this kind of pace for 2 to 3 hours, I think, until first break, and then, you know, take that. Then you go another 2 or 3 hours until lunch, take that, another 2 or 3 till the last break, take that, and then you finish off, you know, another 2 or 3. And, but I really enjoyed it, honestly. I actually really enjoy weed eating. And when I worked for that guy, we did a lot of beautiful derby horse farms here in Kentucky, so I got to see some beautiful scenery that I otherwise would have never seen had I not worked for that man. So I remember just walking down the road one day with my weed eater after finishing this big roadside that kind of wove its way through a beautiful farm, and just looking around and thinking, man, I love this.
Stay on the road, but watch the cars, because there can be copperheads in this. Stay like they're on this side. I watch them coming from that way. If they come, step in the grass. Out of the way, okay?
Yes.
My glasses were fogging up, so I had to... What are we on our time?
9 minutes and 34 seconds.
Okay. Let's go. Right up there. Wait.
Now, when I first started out there weed eating, I thought I was a good worker as far as work ethic and everything, but I just wasn't skilled with a weed eater, honestly. And that has a lot to do with it. So knowing how long to have your string is very important. Like that right there, how that's such tall weeds. If I had my string long, and those powerful commercial steel weed eaters, that's why I like the head off of them. You can have your string longer than the guard will allow, and they pull it great, so you can move a lot quicker. You can get on shorter grass. Now on longer grass like that, you don't want your string so long. But so knowing how long to have your string, and knowing how to swing a weed eater as well. So one day I was out, we were doing another farm that we did, and I believe it was a horse farm as well, but it was very, very overgrown. Probably as overgrown as this job I'm doing here or more. And it was plank fences all throughout it. And so I didn't really know how to swing a weed eater then. I would just kind of weed eat, just without really swinging it like I am here. As you see here, I'm swinging this weed eater. I've learned how to swing it since then. I didn't realize that swinging it was very good for tall weeds like that. Well, one day a man that I worked with, he was a Mexican man named Romero, very hard-working man, a very smart man. And I learned a whole lot from him. And one day he was mowing and I was weed eating, and I watched him get off of his mower. and he just kind of climbed the fence, the fence that I was weed eating, and went to the other side. And rather than telling me how to do it, he just showed me. I don't think he even said anything. I just watched him jump over climb over the fence, and I paid attention to him, and I watched how fast he was moving. He went, I mean, he was kind of almost right across from me, maybe about 5 to 10 feet up from me. So they didn't sling stuff right on me, and he just started moving, and I watched him, and he was swinging his weed eater. That's what he was doing. He was swinging it, and it was from that moment on that I learned that swinging your weed eater in tall weeds like this is the way to go. Because if you just try to gradually weed eat like you normally do, it doesn't work on these tall weeds very good. You're not going to move very fast. But if you swing your weed eater, and it does take a little more work, if you swing that weed eater, you can really move. And I've never used a weed eater with the handlebars. I honestly don't think I would like them as good. They seem like they're great for swinging, but I honestly like the control that I have of a weed eater like that without the handlebars. I'm so used to using them like that. I've done very, very many miles. I mean, and I'm not just saying that, exaggerating. I've done mile upon mile upon mile upon mile of farmland and soccer fields and things of that nature when I did it commercially. And for myself, I've done many homes and stuff as well, and jobs like this. But when you learn how to use a weed eater, I mean, as I said, learning how long to keep your string. And here soon, I believe you'll see me kind of do that, because I noticed that my weed eater is the string seems a little long, and it doesn't have the power that it should have when it's long like that. And what I do is I go over there to the road, and I just hold my throttle in on the road, and you don't get your head too close, but just kind of where your string touches, and you hold it in. And it can be a rock or a fence post or a road, as I do here in a moment. And you hold your throttle in, and you let that string kind of hit a hard surface. And what it does is it kind of eats the string up. And you just do it until you listen to the engine. And when you hear the engine rev up, and you hear that it's got the power to pull that you need, that's when you stop and you go back to weed eating. And so sometimes what I'll do, it's very important to know how long to keep your string. That's one of the most important things with weed eating is knowing how to weed eat, knowing how long to keep your string, knowing how to swing your weed eater, and having a good weed eater. But your string length is one of the most important things. And I think it's overlooked sometimes maybe, especially if you've got the guard off, because that's how I prefer it. That's how we did it. We did plank fences, and we did mile upon mile of them. And with the guard off, we were able to do both sides of the fence from one side. So we could just walk down through there really fast. And I've watched guys weed eat on here on YouTube, and they do a good job. But something I've noticed is some of them that I've seen don't seem comfortable just walking with a weed eater. And part of that is because I think the string length. When you get that string length to where it needs to be in your motor, it has the sufficient power that you need to have for that particular grass that you're doing. You can pretty much walk with it, unless it's long like this. When it's long like this, you can't really walk. You've got to swing your weed eater. But when the grass isn't long, you can walk fast, a very fast pace. That's what we did a lot of the times. That's how those guys were able to get 20 houses a day done. Some of those crews with 3-man crews. 20 houses or 25 houses a day, maybe 30 even. They did. I never really did the residential crew when I worked with them. I didn't enjoy it. I like the farms. I like the farm crew a lot myself. And I like going out and just weed eating and moving. And before I knew it, it was break time. And then, before I knew it, it was lunchtime. Before I knew it, it was the next break. And then it was time to go home. And I was done for the day. I was out in the sun. I was enjoying it. I had the sun upon my face. It felt the breeze, and looked around and seen the beautiful scenery of these places that we did. And I enjoyed the labor that I was doing. And so I think has a whole lot to do with it. But that being said, as I said, I never planned to get into lawn care again. There was a time when I had talked to a man once, and the company that he worked for, he asked if I was interested in doing this place, and it was $100,000 contract. And now if I would have got that, I probably would have stayed in it, to be honest, because that's hard to pass up. But at the same time, with that, you need quite a few helpers, at least, but probably a couple guys, because I think he said it was around 50 acres, but they didn't mow quite all of it. But at the same time, that's what I'm experiencing, is doing large places like that and doing them fast, because you had to really when you got places like that, you had to move fast. You had to keep a certain pace really to get a certain amount done that your boss was happy with. And now me working for myself for the past, this is my 5th year now. I've learned to keep a certain pace in order to get the job done. Like that right there, I got that job done. I made $100 in around, it was 35 or 40 minutes that it took. I think Carter said it was on 42 minutes at the end, but we talked for maybe 4 or 5 minutes at the beginning, something of that nature. and then at the end as well. So I think it was around 40 minutes I got this job done here. But what it was, I just tried to stay consistent, you know. I tried to keep my string where I needed it to be so that my engine had the sufficient power to do it. And then I just tried to keep moving, honestly. And there's many times I've worked and I've been tired and I pushed through that, you know, that tiredness. I just kind of try to keep pushing. And that's what makes your body get used to it.
Yeah, it's 29 minutes.
Let me see it real quick.
29 minutes.
Something you'll have trouble with when you're pointing towards me. When you're weeding like this, these will fog up on you real bad. Your body will get real hot, overheated. I won't say overheated, it will get really hot. And it'll fog your glasses up, and that's why I keep doing this, and you can't hardly see nothing out of them. Now when you're standing on a hill like that and you can't see nothing, you've got sweat dripping on your glasses and they're fogged up, you about got to clear them, or I do. So I try to keep them a little farther away from my face if I can, like that. They still fog up.
This hill was actually pretty steep and hard to stand on in certain places, though. There's actually one place on here where I kind of stumbled. I felt my foot beginning to slide and I couldn't stop it. Listen to this here. Okay, whenever I did that, I held the throttle in and I let the tip of my string hit that black top there. And I just held it in. And what that done was ate that string up a little bit, and then you could hear the engine rev up. Because it just wasn't pulling that string as well as it could have, and it could pull it just fine on shorter grass. But on that longer grass like that, you need your engine to be running quite a bit of power. And so that's what we used to do a lot. You know, sometimes if we had too much string, we would hold it on the fence post and just bring it down a little bit. And I heard guys a lot of times. Some of the guys I worked with, the newer guys, I'd hear them over there weed eating, and their engine would be going bogging down. And I'd tell them, I'd say, your string's too long. You need to take your string down a little bit. Your string's too long, to help them, you know. Not trying to be a know-it or anything. I tried to help the guys, a lot of them, and I like to help people that want help too. There were a lot of guys that came there that were honestly many of them were lazy. They didn't want to be there. They even found some of the guys that were sleeping on the job and stuff. That there were many of them that didn't want to be there, and then there were many of them that did a good job as well. And a lot of them that did a really good had been there 10 or 15 years. And there were a lot of the Mexican men that I worked with, and I learned a whole lot from those guys. Didn't even really know how to drive a zero turn when I started there, but they taught me a whole lot about it.
It's better, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, go down that way.
I don't believe I'll ever forget that, though, my time working with those guys. I mean, I got some very valuable professional experience, honestly. I got professional lawn care experience working with those guys. Commercial experience. And when you get commercial experience, no matter what you're doing, like you hear guys talking about running a chainsaw and doing it for production and stuff like that, you get an experience that a lot of guys that just use a saw for firewood don't get. Same way with that. When I did that, I got a lot of experience that a lot of people don't get with a weed eater or a mower. And it's a very valuable experience, and it's the kind of experience that allows you, if you have good work ethic and everything, and the desire to do your own business, and that's exactly what I did. And now I'm into my 5th year. And as I said, I'm not doing lawn care anymore. I still do landscaping and junk removal. I do firewood. If I ever did lawn care, it would be something like I did for the man that I worked for before, where I could do bigger places, you know. Thing about having those guards off, you will get hit with stuff a lot more, a whole lot more, you will. But it's well worth it to me. I don't even like running a weed eater with the guard on, to be honest with you. After running it for so many years with the guard off, you can move so much quicker with the guard off. You really can. You can get so much more done. You can wrap your weed eater around a tree, you know, from one side of it, or whatever, many things, you know. The guard gets in the way of that, and especially fences. Because fences, as I said, you can walk on one side of the fence and get both sides from one side with the guard off, whereas you have to climb the fence and do the whole other side. And you can imagine, just say you got 5 miles of fence to do, and we did way more than that when I worked for him. But say you got 5 miles to do, and if you do that one side, and you can get the other side from that one side, so you do 5 miles. But if you can't, you've got to climb and do another 5 miles, so you do twice as much work, 10 miles. it's well worth it to take your guard off when you get used to it. Now, I'm not saying that's for everybody to take your guard off, but if you pay attention to a lot of businesses, their workers, they'll have the guards off of them a lot of times because you can move so much quicker. And that's something I love about stihl so much, their weed eaters, is the engines are so powerful. And that self-feed head on stihl I really like, better than any other weed eater I've ever used. And I have used Husqvarna, and that's part of what's made me love stihl so much is their weed eaters. Before I had a stihl chainsaw, I had a stihl weed eater. That's what really made me love stihl, was using their weed eaters. They're commercial weed eaters. They're 111s and they're 90s and they're 131s. I was so impressed with those weed eaters. It just really made me like stihl after that. And I've used Echo, and I like Echo a whole lot as well. I've used Husqvarna, not weed eaters, chainsaws. I've used Echo chainsaw. I like them a lot. Husqvarna, I've never owned a Husqvarna weed eater or a Husqvarna chainsaw. And part of the reason why is I've used a Husqvarna weed eater before. My friend's mom had bought one, and it was almost new, and I used it, and it no comparison to the stihl. And that was that particular one. I can't even remember what model it was, but it was no comparison to the stihl that was around the same price as it. So that would have probably been a stihl FS56, probably around the same CC engine. The stihl was way better, and the head on it, the self-feed head on the stihl, was way better. Some of those weed eaters, the heads are very annoying to try to use. That's very important too, is having a good head. Those stihls, you bump them, the self-feed head, and you pull the trigger and your strain comes out. But that's part of what's made me love stihl so much is their weed eaters. And then I got stihl saws, too many of them, and I've used a Husqvarna 455 Rancher, I believe. My neighbor had it, and honestly, I didn't care much for it. And so that's part of why I like stihl so much as well with their chainsaws. But that was that particular chainsaw. I don't think he had it sharp or anything either. And if you don't got a good sharp chain on, it doesn't matter how powerful the engine is, it's not going to cut very well. So I can't speak to Husqvarna's chainsaws, but as far as their weed eaters, the one that I did use, it was no comparison to stihl. No comparison, in my opinion. In any way. I mean, the functionality of it, as far as the engine, the power, the comfort, and then the self-feed head, everything about the stihl was better. As far as the chainsaws go, I've watched a lot of guys use Husqvarnas, and you can just see by the results of them using them, they work great, obviously. I still, myself, like stihl, and I probably always will stick with stihl. I'm not against trying other things, like Echo. I really enjoy Echo chainsaws. I've heard they make good weed eaters, and so Husqvarna probably makes good weed eaters, but the one I used was not good. I wasn't impressed at all with it.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it off. Jack. Come on.
Yeah.
Nice, now you stand on it.
Huh?
Nice, now you stood on that.
Did you get a shot from down at the bottom? All right, there you go. So if you got a determination and a good tool, you can get a lot done. It takes doing stuff like that pretty consistent for a while to be able to keep a pace like that, though. Worked with a lot of men when I used to work for that commercial business. I seen a lot come and go, because they'd come there and that guy wanted a certain pace, and a lot of them couldn't do it, so they'd quit. We did big Derby horse farms. That pace right there, that was about all day when I worked there. And we did roadsides that were steep like that. We did mile after mile of horse fences, all kinds of stuff. Turn around here and show it to you. That's steep. You can't tell exactly how steep that is. I was afraid of getting bit by a copperhead too, to be honest with you. And this is ditch right here. All this. But that's very steep. You can't really tell on this camera how steep.
Oh yeah, that's why I said on there.
Yeah, it's very steep. That doesn't show it at all, really, cameras. I don't understand why they do that, but they really don't seem to show the lay of the land very accurate. But anyways, got that done, I think in around 40 minutes, $100, so that's over 100 an hour right there with the weed eater. Done quite a few jobs like that. Now, there's a roadside done for my mom, it was a lot longer stretch than this, a lot bigger job than this. And it would take me about 2.5 hours. She said 3 guys came out there one day, or I guess those same guys had done it maybe numerous times. I think it took them 6 hours, she said. But I think they were sitting down quite a bit, taking breaks, and probably not moving a certain pace, And honestly, that kind of pace, learning how to
use a weed eater like that, I wouldn't know how if I wouldn't ever work for that commercial business. I wouldn't be able to do it the way I do it now. And I ain't saying that a bragging way. I owe it to those guys really learning to weed eat the way I do, that I can now. I couldn't do it then. Thought I was good at it then, but I wasn't as good as I thought I was. When I started working with them guys, I realized that real quick.